Hello and welcome to the fourth instalment of Break the Glass. I'm Saj, the Director of Operations at the NAS Legacy Foundation. The foundation aims to support young people throughout education and promote and encourage positive integration and facilitate interfaith relations. We do this via our diversity program, the NAS Bakari program, and our interfaith gatherings. Information on all our programs can be found on our website, www.naslegacy.org. I will now pass it on to our partners in this series and my co-host, M.
Hi everyone, welcome to this inspiring series, which I'm actually finding inspiring. Our speakers are fantastic. My name is Em. I am the founder of Rising Girl. We're also joined by our other trustees, Rifat and Shamaila, and we have our other teams that are joining us as well on this series. What does Rising Girl do? We actually deliver 6 to 8 week Rise Together program in schools in the UK to empower girls above some of the serious issues they may face directly or indirectly. Things like domestic violence, forced marriage, honor-based violence, mental illness, and courses like that. We also run a Teach the Teacher program and a peer-to-peer learning program. So we have young Rise Together ambassadors talking about the great work that we do in our schools. And we also are about to launch an international program. We are about to also have our online program for girls who are still stuck in lockdown or are at home during the summer holidays and just need that extra little bit of support.
So throughout the series, we will hear from and be joined by trailblazers who have faced abuse, prejudice, misogyny, and challenged discriminations throughout their lives. We will be running these powerful talks throughout the summer. So videos from all our sessions can be viewed on our Facebook page, NAS Legacy. Please feel free to tweet about today's session using the hashtag #BreakTheGlass, tagging Rising Girl and NAS Legacy. Please submit questions through the Q&A box, and the chat box will remain open throughout the session.
Please note that this talk may feature some details that some viewers may find upsetting, including details of sexual abuse. Today, we are super excited to be joined by a woman who has broken barriers and overcome adversities throughout her life. Writer, journalist, broadcaster, campaigner, and advisor to the government. I'm honored to present Charlie Webster.
Thank you so much for having me, all of you, Sad. That was a fantastic introduction. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone that's watching. It's a really tough time at the moment, isn't it? So I hope you're all doing okay. A lot of uncertainty. So where do I start with myself? I think I'm going to start where I am now and then take it back to when I was younger. So Em gave me a really wonderful introduction. Thank you very much. I'm a broadcaster across TV and radio, but I've kind of maneuvered my career slightly a little bit. So I'm a journalist, I'm a writer, but I do a lot of campaigning. And as Em mentioned, I sit on a Ministry of Justice panel and advise the government around issues of sexual and domestic abuse. I'm working with the Centre for Social Justice on a very big project around child sexual exploitation and child sexual abuse. And so I do a lot of work in that area as well, and around mental health. I have a podcast which speaks to sports stars about mental health, and it's going really well. It's been fantastic. I'm featured by Apple. And also I created a series around domestic abuse. I did an investigative series last year called Undiscussable, which followed the journey and had a challenging rethinking around domestic abuse. And then now I actually got the series commissioned for Talk Radio. So it's been an 8-part special series looking at healthy relationships, education, domestic abuse, like gender stereotyping. So I suppose that's where I am right now. Although actually I was meant to be in Tokyo right now, working on the Olympics. So, but I'm not, I'm sat in my home talking to you, which is fantastic. So I think that's a real nutshell of where I am now. Some of the things that I've done, and I'm going to go back. I almost want you to hear some of the things that I've done now, and then show you what my life was like as a young person. So I was the first woman in Asia to host sport. So I moved to Asia. I was scouted to move to Asia when I was like 23 years old. And I was so young and inexperienced, and it was really difficult because at the time only men really worked in that area. And I think things have changed a lot, even though I think there still can be some prejudices. And so it was really big when I became the first woman to host sport over there, live sport. And then I also became the first woman in the world to work on boxing and to host live boxing and host a heavyweight world title fight. So I've done a few firsts in that area. I also do a lot of competition where I run, I don't know if you've heard of Ironman triathlon. And also I did a big challenge where I ran 250 miles down the country, and I actually got honoured in Parliament for doing that, because I was raising money for Women's Aid, and we were talking about domestic abuse. And then 4 years ago now, actually, I cycled from London to Rio. I cycled 3,000 miles, which sounds completely crazy, I know, for 5 weeks. And I think we completed it in just under 5 weeks and got there in time for the Olympics. So I've done quite a lot of challenges, lots of different marathons as well. Have won various different accolades. But actually, where I'm from, when I was younger, I'm from Sheffield. I don't know whether anybody of you know it, in Yorkshire. And I actually was brought up in quite a difficult background. So my mum had me when she was a teenager. Very proud of my mum, but things were very difficult for her, as you can imagine. She was a 16-year-old mum with me, and it was very frowned upon then as well. And we didn't have any money. I don't come from a background of well-connected people or money or anything. And then I was brought up in a household of domestic abuse as well. So there's a lot of very unhealthy relationships. I used to feel very scared, and it was really horrible watching my mum so upset all the time. And a lot of things were done to me in the home as well. So I didn't really like being at home. I didn't really have a safe space at home. And I used to spend a lot of time just outside. And then by the time I think I was in my early teenage years, I felt very low. I felt very depressed. I used to self-harm and just felt very lonely, and like that I wasn't very good and I wasn't good enough. And I think I felt very worthless. And then I found running, and I ran basically, and I joined a running group, and it became like my family and my safe space and my savior, and it was amazing, and I had amazing friends. But then my running coach saw, I think, how vulnerable I was and took advantage of that, and actually ended up, I mean, I'm sure you've heard of grooming and understand what grooming behavior is. And my coach used to say to me that I was really amazing and I was really good, and I used to win races, and I was representing my city and my county and north of England. And then I went to the nationals as well. But at the same time, my coach was actually sexually abusing me. And it was very confusing at that time, because I didn't have a very safe home life. I didn't have many people I could turn to. And like I said, I think I felt very lonely and very confused in that. And I felt like I couldn't speak out, or I didn't really understand what a normal relationship was, or what a healthy relationship was, or I felt like it was very much my fault. And I felt like, well, maybe I deserve it because I'm not good enough. And I think then I had this like pattern in my head of feeling that if only I was better, if only I was cleverer, if only I looked better, if only I could achieve this, if only I was from a better background, if only I had some money, you know, all these things that I felt like I was never good enough. So I basically went to live with my nan and granddad, which was a more positive environment, but at the same time I felt very sad and very lonely because I felt disconnected from my family. And then at that period, I was like, okay, there's got to be something more for me. But in the area in the school I went to, it was very much like I was written off. So I went to the same school that my mum went to, and a lot of people thought, oh, well, she's the child of the child that fell pregnant. So I think I was very typecast in that sense. And because I was from a very poor household, I was on free school meals, I was very aware that I wasn't privileged. I didn't have things like some of the other kids did. And like I said, I didn't feel like I had a lot of love or a lot of support, but I worked really, really hard because I decided, well, you know, I don't want to run because of what was happening to me. And even though I felt like I wanted to be a professional athlete, but then I was like, right, there's got to be something that I can do in my life. Like I feel like this isn't, you know, just my life. So a few people said, oh, why don't I try to go to university? And I was like, what? I can't go to university. I don't have any money. I'm not from that kind of background. You know, I'm from a poor place in Sheffield, and I don't have family support. So, you know, how am I supposed to even get there? And then I was like, well, I'm just going to apply because I've got nowhere to live anyway. So I might as well try and apply for university. And I did apply for university. And again, I didn't think I was good enough, but I got in, and I was like, oh my gosh. So nobody in my family had been educated or ever been to university or gone into higher education. All my family left at 16, and that was the kind of history of my family. So when I got into university, again, I thought, oh, well, I've got the place, but I'm still not clever enough. I'm not good enough. I don't think I should go. But then I didn't really have anywhere to go because I didn't have a family home. So I ended up going to university, and it was the best thing I ever did. But when I got there, sometimes I was like, who are these people? Because everybody spoke really posh, and I'd never heard like a middle class standard RP accent in my life, or a different accent from mine. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I felt so out of place. I felt like all these people were better than me. But I was like, well, if I work really hard, then, you know, maybe I can try and get a degree. And my confidence just grew when I realized, oh, hang on a second, like I'm actually getting good marks. I can do this. But I worked full time as well when I was at university to try and financially support myself, because I wasn't financially supported. So I didn't have a grant, and I didn't have family paying for my degree. So I worked full time in a gym. I got qualified as a personal trainer because I was like, I need a skill. So I went on this course and I loved sport, and I know so much about sport because of all the running competitions that I'd done as a teenager. So I got qualified as a fitness instructor and as a personal trainer, and then worked in a gym as an 18-year-old training, teaching classes. And then I'd teach a class in my sweaty gym gear, and then I'd go to a lecture and sit in a lecture, you know, and everybody else had just got up. You know, they'd been in bed till 11 o'clock, whereas I'd been teaching from 6 o'clock in the morning. And then I sat in my lecture, and then I went straight back to the gym, still in my sweaty tracksuit, and then taught another class, a lunchtime class, and then went back to my lectures. And that was my university life, I suppose. But then I started to make some amazing friends. And I just was like, oh my gosh, like I'm in control of my life. I can earn money. I can, you know, I can support myself. I can, you know, I'm doing my education. I'm going to get a degree. I've got friends. And it was like a real amazing turning point for me, because it gave me so much sense of achievement. And then that's when I went on to work in my career. So I graduated, got my degree. I still had very low self-esteem, but I moved to London because I was very much like, I think because of my background, I was very risk taker because I'd got nothing to lose, you know, nothing could be worse from some of the things that happened to me. So I just moved to London, and I had no contacts, I had no money, and I just got a job in a gym, and then tried to sign up to different agencies and tried to get as much experience as possible. And then after my degree, I signed up to a course to do journalism. So I worked on that. And I think I just was so determined to try and create a life that was so different from what I knew. And I think we often feel, especially when we're younger, it was definitely something that I felt, that I didn't belong there. And I, you know, because of where I was from and because of everything that happened to me, that I didn't belong in a place where I could achieve, or, you know, I wasn't like these people that were amazing and could do all these achievements. And and be successful and independent and and make change. And but then I started to when I started to get into TV. So I actually got my first job in television when I was 21 years old, and I think over 1,000 people went up for the job. And I remember walking into the room, and I saw all these people. I mean, there wasn't 1,000 people there, but there was a couple of hundred when I went, and then I think it was staggered. And I was like, oh no. Everybody was wearing a suit. Everybody was much older than me. Nearly everybody in the room was male. And I walked in as a 21-year-old, and I had like ripped jeans on and a t-shirt, and I'm very tall and 5'10". My hair's very long. It was even longer than this and a little bit blonder. And I was like, oh no, like I'm just not good enough to go for this job. But then I was like quite stubborn and quite feisty. And I was like, well, I don't care about these people. I'm just going to go for the job anyway. And I could have just walked away and was like, oh no, this is not for me. And these people are all better than me. But I was like, no, I'm going to sit here and go for this job. And if I don't get it, I don't get it. But if I don't try, then I never know. And I ended up getting the job out of 1,000 people, over 1,000 people. And that was my first television job, actually presenting football. And I think what it made me start to realize was that I didn't need to look a certain way. And because I was always kind of paranoid about the way I look, and people maybe think I was stupid, or because of where I'm from, or because of my accent, that maybe maybe people won't want to work with me. But one of the things that it started to teach me was that, why did I get that job? I got that job because I was friendly, I was enthusiastic, I was passionate, I was determined, I was dedicated. I really wanted to work hard. And also I really knew my subjects. Like I knew football very well, because from a very young age, I used to watch football. I used to go to the games sometimes with my dad, even when my mum and dad got divorced. And I used to play football at school, and sport was just something I was always interested in. And actually they didn't care about some of the other things that I thought they would care about, as in the fact that I wasn't wearing a suit, or the fact that I was a woman. And they actually I asked them, and they gave me the job because they really liked my enthusiasm and my passion, and could see my potential, which started to teach me that, or maybe I do have some assets and skills that people will want to work with me on. And so from there, it really helped me build my confidence. And then that's when I worked very, very hard. And I think I felt like I had a lot to prove. And then from then on is when I got scouted to go to Asia and became the first woman in Asia, and then to present sport. And then I moved back to England, and then I worked in Formula One. I did World Cups, I did Champions Leagues, I did 2 Olympics, I did Wimbledon. And I think I just grew in confidence. And every time I was like, still, even when I worked at Sky, I thought, I'm from a very different background from these people. I'm a very different type of person. I'm, a very deep person, and and also I had a lot of trauma, and I also live with depression, and I think it's something that I felt very different from the people that I worked with. But then I was like, but actually the difference I can bring is a real asset, and is a real positivity. And I think in any area, in any career, in any job, if we're all the same and we're like other people, then we won't be able to bring differences. So for example, like a woman in a room with all men, the woman could probably bring a really different thought process, or a different, it's about I think having both sets of different types of people in the room. And that's what I started to realize. And even now, in some of the work I do, the project I do where I speak to sports stars around mental health, I'm like, oh, hang on a second, like I can do this, and I can speak to people because I've experienced that myself. Like I understand what it's like to feel low, and to be in dark places, and to have depression. And those are the things that maybe people will, that's why I can actually do that job and do that role. But then I did very well in my career, but then when at the very beginning, do you remember I told you that like one of the things I want to talk about was one of the biggest challenges in my life. I had a lot of challenges when I was younger, as you've heard, and it took me a long time to really grow my self-esteem. But then I think there's another part as well. It took me a long time to really grow my worth inside. So I think you can build your confidence and your self-esteem, but then I still had this voice that told me that I wasn't good enough all the time, and it told me to work harder and to push harder. And every time I achieved something, it was almost never good enough, because it was like, well, I achieved that, but then I need to go to the next thing and the next thing. And I think one of the things I really worked on was to try and appreciate what I'd done, and that I was good enough, and I am good enough just the way I am, no matter what the different achievements I have. And what really taught me with that was one of the biggest challenges in my adult life was when I cycled to Rio. I cycled 3,000 miles, arrived in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. I was meant to be presenting on the Olympics. I had so many different projects. I was working on a big project in America with Facebook and Ryan Seacrest. And I had all these different things, that incredible things that I'd worked so hard to try and get. And then I ended up in hospital. And the next day, after the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games, and I was at the opening ceremony, I was like, this is amazing. And then the next day I had one of the biggest challenges ever in my life, and I was sent to hospital. And then the next day I ended up in a coma, and I was actually on a life support machine, and I was critically ill, and I had multiple organ failure and multiple tropical diseases, including malaria and another one that I can't pronounce, and hemolytic uremic syndrome and Shigella, and all these four different diseases I had, plus pneumonia. And the doctors actually said that I was dying, and that's what my family was told. And I knew that as well. So I was like, oh my gosh. And it was really interesting, because in that moment, I didn't have any regrets or anything. I just wanted to live. I just wanted to do more. And then obviously I survived, because I'm here and I'm not a ghost. But I was in hospital for over 2 months. I was then repatriated back to England. And then, I had more of my recovery. I mean, that's a whole other talk in itself. So I won't go into too much detail around that, maybe another time. And but when I came out of hospital, I had to learn how to walk again. I couldn't walk. And this was coming up to 4 years ago. So it was 4 years ago in August. So it's quite recent. And I had to learn how to walk again. I had like brain hemorrhaging, so my words didn't come out right sometimes. I couldn't see properly. I had all these different damaged things, and I had kidney damage, and I still have kidney damage now. But I was almost at a crossroads where I felt like, oh my gosh, like what's happened to me? Who am I? Like, after all these things I've fought for and I've worked for, and then this happened to me. And I felt really low, and I got diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. I was really depressed, and loads of people were saying to me, you're so lucky to be alive. And I was like, yeah, I'm so lucky to be alive, but I feel so crap inside. And I felt so just down and confused, and whether I could ever get my career back, because I couldn't work. And then everything that I was working on just disappeared. All my contracts went, but it was also about like how I actually felt inside. And I felt like I'd lost my identity. And so I went on some real soul searching. And what I also realized was that a lot of the stuff that happened to me when I was younger, I hadn't really dealt with. So I went on this journey to try and heal a lot of the things that happened to me when I was younger. And as part of that, I went and studied schema therapy for 2 years, and went as part of a trauma group. And then I just had this amazing realization that even though I'd achieved so much and I'd worked so hard, it was so important that I didn't value myself on my achievements. So I actually valued me for me, and that even if I didn't achieve that thing, or I didn't get that job, that it was okay, because I'm still good enough just as I am. And I think that was one of the biggest lessons And if I look back, I remember when I was looking to do this talk, and I was talking to some of the amazing people that are running this, like, what do I wish I knew back then? And I don't think I wish I knew anything when I was younger, other than that I am good enough just as I am. And I think that's the most important thing that we can ever learn and we can ever feel, because I think it's really important. I know this series is called Break the Glass, and I broke so much glass and so many ceilings, and I was so determined to, because I think I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder, because I felt like everybody else was more privileged than me, and I wanted to show that somebody like me, and from my background and from a really, really troubled home life, and that had suffered a lot of trauma and abuse, could be something and could get to where I am now. But I think one of the biggest lessons was in that I think I was doing it because I wanted to prove to everyone else, but I never really felt it myself. So I think that I tried to switch things, and it was the biggest lesson I've ever learned. And that's that through the challenge of being so ill and having to really be stripped raw, and it made me kind of learn to heal and to love myself a lot more, which I think is one of the most important things when we're trying to break the black glass and when we're trying to strive, because I think I was so hard on myself and I worked so hard and I wanted to achieve all these things, was that my achievements are amazing, but I need to be able to feel good about who I am, because otherwise I think sometimes, we can do all these things and we can get an A, but we think, oh, well, I could have done better, I could have done harder, rather than being like, no, I worked really hard on this and I'm doing really well. And also I think if we ever get a rejection or we don't get something, which happens so much in my industry, even now, like where I am now, sometimes, I work for something and then it doesn't happen, or I work on a particular project and then it doesn't get a commission. That happened to me recently. I wrote a project for a network. I shouldn't really say which one. And then I thought it was going to get the commission. It didn't. And I was like, oh, this is so frustrating. And I think it's so important to learn how to take those knockbacks and remember that those knockbacks aren't personal, and they don't mean that you aren't good enough. They can just be somebody's opinion, or they can just be down to budget, or if you're applying for university, it can just be down to, maybe that's not right for you, or maybe it's just somebody's opinion. It doesn't mean that that person's opinion takes away your value from you. So that, I think, is one of the biggest things I've learned. And I have so many stories I can tell, but I think it's wrap up time for me to see if there's any questions. But yeah, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Charlie, for sharing your inspirational journey with us. For information, help, and support on domestic and sexual abuse, please visit womensaid.org. We will put the web address in the chat box for your information. I will now pass it to Em, who will facilitate the Q&A.
Hi, Charlie.
How you doing?
That was amazing. I actually thought
I don't know how to pack it in 15 minutes though. I'm like
pack your entire life in that. I thought I knew you, and actually I learned so much about you in what you your journey, and oh my goodness, and the illness, and wow, you're incredible. I bow down to you. I'm bowing.
Thank you. You'll embarrass me.
Well, you've actually survived, which is amazing. And a lot of women go through so much turmoil.
Yeah.
To hear that you've actually been through similar things that they may be experiencing and actually lived, and you're so successful now, is actually such an inspiration for so many women. So thank you so much for joining this series, co-hosted by us and Naz Legacy Foundation. I'm going to go to the comments because there's lots of people wanting to say how amazing you are and how inspired they were. Samantha basically has a comment saying she was humbled to be part of this event this morning. She said, "Hi Charlie, honoured to hear you share your story. You're such a true inspiration."
Oh, bless you. Thanks, Sam. Love you lots.
Another chap, Steve Hill, basically said, "Hi Charlie, after following your journey for near death in Rio to where you are now, it gave me the inspiration to improve my life. Despite my lack of self-confidence and the negative voices that you have described, I am now in a much better place working towards my dream job. You are a true inspiration." And you really are.
And also, just on that, thank you, Steve, that I think it's
we're having trouble hearing you, Charlie.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Sorry, I've got dodgy headphones, everyone. Because I broke my headphones. I need to buy some. What I was going to say was that I think it's really important that I think sometimes people look at, and sometimes people look at me and think, oh gosh, you know, and I'm like, oh no, that's not me. Like, I have those negative voices too. Like, you know, I think it's important to, just because you've reached a certain way to, you know, I suppose I'm just trying to say is I have those negative voices too sometimes that have a go at me. And I think one of the most important things I've learned around that, just on that comment, is that it's really important to recognize that they don't serve you, and to be like, oh, okay, this is a comment being horrible to me. So for example, if I made those comments to you, it would really knock your confidence and you would feel awful. So why am I doing that to myself? But I think we have that critic sometimes. So it's important to go, I know you are not going to battle with it, because I think when we go into battle with it, we can be like, no, I am good enough. No, you're not. No, I am. And it becomes exhausting, like emotionally exhausting, and it can really cause you to feel so low. So I think one of the things I do is go, you know, you don't serve me. You're over here. I know what you are. Like, you're just things that maybe I've heard from my childhood, what I've been told when I was younger, and other people's things. And I've taken that voice on, and actually I'm a healthy adult that can be positive towards myself, and that can give myself healthy messages. Like, I am good enough. And I do deserve it. And I think it's really important to reinforce those messages. And they're really important because we act and behave how we speak to ourselves.
Oh, brilliant. So I'm going to crack on with the questions, because there are so many and people are also messaging me on other various networks.
Can you hear me all right, by the way?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Absolutely. Bushra Nasir basically said, "You're brilliant and moving talk. Who has been your role models to date?"
Oh, wow. That's such a good question. I thought hard about this because I don't feel like I had a lot of role models when I was younger. But then two of the ones I think that took that when I was younger and when I was running and I was competing, I did meet Kelly Holmes once because she trained at the track I was at. And I used to look at her and think, wow, she's amazing. Because I don't know about yourself, but when I was younger, I found there wasn't many female role models. There wasn't many women. And I did have male role models as well. But I think, you know, it's important sometimes that you can associate with something about that person. And for her, I was like, wow, she's incredible. She's worked so hard as a runner, and she's won the Olympics. And I think I looked at her and she was an amazing role model to me. Then very, very strangely, it might seem a bit off the park, but I used to read a lot of Muhammad Ali's books when I was younger. And I think I know I'm very different from him. He's a man, he's a black man, and you know, he's a Muslim. But there's so much of his struggle of not being told he was enough, I think I related to. So I used to read loads of his books. But then on a personal note, the person I think who helped me a lot was my granddad. He's sadly not here anymore, but he showed me love that I think I didn't get many other places. And I think sometimes it's just one person. And he made me feel like I was definitely good enough for him. And I felt that from him. And so he had a big impact on me in that sense. So yeah, I think my granddad was a really big part of my life. So I think there were the three role models when I was younger. And then, I don't know, I suppose like lots of different people I take things from right now. And I think a lot of young people I am inspired by. Whenever I give talks, they inspire me back. So I think it's a mutual relationship a lot of the time. And I think a lot of young people inspire me to do better and be better and show that you can go to wherever you want to.
Oh, brilliant. I do absolutely agree with you, because there wasn't actually, I can't even remember one woman who looked like me when I was growing up to say, actually, you're an inspiration. I want to be like you, because there really wasn't, especially in our culture. They're absolutely, I'm like, my mother and my aunties, they were all homemakers. And so that was our role models. And as great as that is, it's, you know, it doesn't help us progress in our careers. So yeah, and it's so important for women like you to step forward, and women like who look like me to step forward, especially when they've done phenomenally well in their lives.
Yeah, and I think on that as well, for me, it was very much, I think the difference when I was younger, it was very much that I was, you know, poor, from an uneducated family, from a broken home. And I think it was like, I never, when I first went into media, I never met anybody that was from a low income background.
Yeah.
And I think that was a big thing for me. It's like everybody seemed to have, you know, their parents' support, their financial support, had that, I don't know, kind of economical privilege background. And with that, I think money is never an issue. It should never be. But with that becomes a lack of self-worth that almost like I sometimes was made to feel like, you know, in some of the networks I was involved in when I was younger, that I wasn't good enough because I came from a working class Yorkshire background with a Yorkshire accent.
Oh, bless you. But you're amazing. You're more than good enough. So I'll go on to, Rifat has a question. She said, Charlie, you're absolute legend of a woman. I never imagined that this would be your story when you started speaking. I am honored to learn about you and respect your bravery today. Given the strength and resilience you've shown, what is your advice to someone who is doubting themselves? What are your top tips? And that is a really good question, because a lot of the time, like you said, we all doubt ourselves, but we need to turn that around, and doing that is the hardest part.
Absolutely. I think self-doubt is it's so common. Like, I don't think I've met anybody, even, and I've met some really incredible people that haven't doubted themselves or don't doubt themselves. You know, whether that's, I don't know, sports stars or incredible politicians, or I don't know, whoever they are, incredibly inspiring people. And I don't think I've met anybody. And I think that's a learning curve in itself, because I think there can be a perception that these people here that are so successful in these leadership positions don't self-doubt, and they do. And I think that's important. So it's to not, well, I'm doubting myself. All these people have done these things and they don't doubt themselves. They absolutely do. So I think that's the first point, and so do I. I think how I get over self-doubt is sometimes when I do doubt myself, even now, and it's so annoying because I'm like, why do I still doubt myself sometimes? But I think at the same time, the way I deal with that is I think a lot of my friends say this, is go, you know, look at some of the things that you've already done and you've already achieved. And it can be like, you know, it doesn't have to be the world's this or the world's for, you know, just some of the things, I don't know, you maybe achieved at school or achieved in that day, and think, oh, hang on, like I actually achieved that. And it's about, well, I went for that and then it actually did happen. And it's about rewriting that narrative sometimes, because I think we give ourselves a false narrative that, oh, well, I'm not good enough, or I can't do that, or I doubt that I can do that. It's like, why? Maybe question it, like, why? Because that's why I'm like, why can't I do that? Why am I telling myself I can't? And then I look at the times when I have done it and think, well, I did then, so why can't I now? And I think sometimes, like, it's hard to get rid of that self-doubt. So I think sometimes you can have that self-doubt and just still go for something, because even when you have it, you don't have to go up for something or whatever it is you're talking about, or strive for this career you want or relationship or whatever it is. And you don't have to be free of self-doubt as well. I think that's important. So you know, sometimes I go for things and I'm like, well, it could happen, but oh no, maybe they don't want me, or maybe then, and it's like, well, actually, you know, why wouldn't they? And I think it's just a lot of conversations in your head, and also knowing that it's okay to self-doubt. Everybody does, you know, even Barack Obama, you know what I mean? Even the top people will have self-doubt, and Michelle Obama. And I think it's just important to recognize that it's okay, because I think sometimes if you battle it all the time, it can just end up being a horrible, you know, foggy mess in your head. And so I think, yeah, like just know that people do self-doubt and that it's okay to, and have a little conversation with yourself. That's what I do a lot. Sometimes I did go through a stage where I carried positive messages to myself in my wallet, in my purse. I don't, it might sound daft, but I did. And if I was really doubting myself, I would read those messages that I wrote to myself, that I am good enough, I'm good enough as I am, you know, and I'd read them to remind myself if I went up for something big. And because I think also it's really important to give yourself positive messages and healthy messages, because sometimes, especially if you're going for a particular job, if you go in there straight away thinking that you're not good enough, I think sometimes it can change the way that you approach things, and it can really limit your potential. So my advice would be lots of really healthy messages. And if you still have that doubting voice, it's okay. Give yourself some more healthy messages and just go for it.
Fantastic. And you know, it's really important because I personally as well, you know how they say when you think positive, positive will happen, and then you work on thinking positive and then it doesn't happen and you think, well, hold on a minute, well, this isn't working. And then you doubt the fact that you're trying to actually think positive. And I know that's not just me, I know that's pretty much everyone, but it's hard because, you know, and I asked this question to Asma as well, who came on a few weeks ago, and I said, how many doors actually closed for you before one actually opened? Because a lot of us will be banging on lots of doors and wanting lots of things to happen, and none of them open, and you think, well, what am I doing wrong? And I actually had this exact thought last week when I was going for something and it didn't happen, and I was like, what did I do? Was I really that bad? What did I say? And you think, you continue to doubt yourself, thinking, well, I thought I was amazing, and I thought I had all this information, and I thought I could do this, and I didn't. Yeah. So the question would be like, how many doors did you actually have to bang on before one actually opened?
1 million. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but not far off. A lot of doors. And again, I think when I was younger, if somebody had said to me that that's okay, it would have helped me, because I think I had a perception in my head that it was me, that it was because I wasn't good enough. And I think, and I think that's very common. So I think, you know, I've had a lot of doors close, but it doesn't mean that I didn't get where I was or where I am, if that makes sense. So I think that a lot of doors were closed in my face, but some of them were opened. And then the ones that were opened, I just worked so hard to maximize that potential. And I think when the doors do close, be upset, be angry, be annoyed. It's so important. You don't have to be positive all the time. I think that's something that, even though I just said all those positive messages, I think sometimes it's okay to feel upset and to feel negative. I mean, even now, if something doesn't happen, like for a day, I'll probably get really annoyed. I'll go in a mood. I'll like feel crappy about it. And I think that's important, that you can actually let that happen, allow it to happen, allow yourself to feel rubbish, allow yourself to feel sad, but then pick it up and go again. And to me, I think it's the people that achieve what they want to achieve, and it doesn't matter what it is, it doesn't, you know, it can look like anything, are the ones that, you know, dust themselves off and go again. And the amount of times I've had to dust myself off is a lot, but that's absolutely normal. Again, I've never met anybody that's gone into something that they really want to and not had to dust themselves off and try again. But I think on that, try and maybe twist it on its head and think, well, actually, it would be far worse if I didn't try. You know, I think we sometimes it hurts when we get rejections and we get knockbacks, but then at least I think I'd rather that, because I think I'd hurt on a daily basis if I just didn't bother.
Fantastic. And I'm back. I'm sorry I had some problems.
I was like, I'll just carry on jogging.
I don't know where I disappeared to, but I'm back now. The wonders of technology. So Samantha Billingham is asking, at what stage in your journey did you start sharing your story, and how did you feel when you spoke the first time? Because speaking about abuse, it's hard, because I remember when I was married and I never spoke about domestic violence. Only now, you're talking 18 years later, I'm now speaking about it, and I'm still not speaking about it openly. Yeah. So it's not an easy thing to do.
No. And I think it's also complicated because it involves other people. And I think the thing we forget about, especially domestic abuse, is that it often involves family. And so I think that's very difficult sometimes. It's almost like you're not always free to just speak, because it does affect other people. The first time I spoke about the fact that I was sexually abused, groomed and sexually abused over a period of time when I was a teenager, was about 5 years ago. And I'd only spoken to a few select friends about it. And I think one of the most important things I learned recently, of recent years, is how important it was for me to open up, because I was very closed. And then what happened was, because I was very closed, I kept my hurt inside, which meant that I was quite guarded. And then because I was quite guarded, I felt like I was protecting myself and I was never going to get hurt. But then with that is, because I was so guarded, I almost didn't allow myself to be cared for and feel love, because I was so guarded. And I think sometimes when you go through trauma and abuse, it can make you extremely guarded, to let any other people in, because your trust has been betrayed and you've been hurt. And I think it's so important to try and break that guard down, because I think what it does is, even though you feel like it's protecting you, it also really limits your potential. And so the first time I did speak about it, I remember I was doing a big challenge, and I was raising money, and I spoke about it on live radio. The next day, it was the #1 news story everywhere. It was everywhere. And you know what? I felt like I just wanted to curl up in a ball and die. Like, I'll be really honest, like, which I think is really important. I felt embarrassed, ashamed, and it brought back so many horrible feelings for me. I thought people wouldn't want to work with me, wouldn't want to talk to me, wouldn't want to be anywhere near me. Then I checked my phone, and I had around 4,000 emails of people that had gone through the same thing through my website. And I was like, what? And then I got these requests to speak about it. And I was like, hang on a second, like, actually, like, this is allowing people to, I'm not allowing people, but it was almost like me speaking about it created a bit of a forum for people to go, oh, that happened to me. And then I was like, oh my gosh, like, you know, I don't want people that have been through this to feel like ashamed, or to feel embarrassed, or to feel like it was their fault. So I think I was like, well, hang on, I have a responsibility to show that it's not. So if I feel like that, how can I be a good role model to show other people that it's not their fault? So, and it also taught me that I needed to do a lot of work myself, and to do a lot of healing, and not be so closed off with it. And then when I started speaking about domestic abuse, that was really hard. Again, I went through the same feelings. I felt like I just wanted to put a cover over my head and nobody ever see me again. You know, because it brings back a lot of feelings, and I think it's still something that can be very stigmatized. But then again, it was almost like my drive to make sure that that's not the case. And that's what still drives me, I think, is I don't want other people to feel like I felt, and to go through like I felt, because I think you take it on as your own a lot of the time, as if it's your fault, but it's absolutely not. And I think it's really common. It's really, really common. And that's why it's so important to speak about it, because it's still seen as this thing over here. And because it's so common, I think it makes it harder, because it's so personal for a lot of people. And there's like confusion of love and other people's relationships, and your family relationships all just boil down in it. But I think it's so important to speak about it, because it almost shows that it's not, I think when you're taught, it's almost like a secret thing. And I think the more that we speak about it, the more that we can show that it's not, and bring it out into the light.
Absolutely agree with you. And I think with me, it was a case of I need to protect my son, because I don't want him to hear about all these horrors, because it affects your family and your friends. But also within our culture as well, it's almost being judged, and you don't want to be judged, and you don't want people to say, oh, she's just making that up, because even it's still a taboo within our culture to speak about these things openly. And you can see it's only very, very, very strong women who pluck up the courage, who stand up and actually be heard. But what I will say is, speaking up can actually help you, and it can help. And if you think about it, depending on the career, it can actually enhance your career, because you are a woman who has survived, and it shows that you have a whole different skill set. So actually, I do think that it helps your career. I know we've got tons of questions and not much time, so I'm going to rush to the questions.
Yeah, sorry, I'll do shorter answers.
No, it's okay. So Tammy is basically saying, thank you for sharing your story. You're absolutely amazing. I wanted to ask you what your advice would be to someone who knows someone that is going through abuse. How can people best support them?
Right, that's a really good question. I think that the first and foremost, it depends what it is. I don't know whether this is within a relationship or within family. I think that it's really important to be aware that there might be a safety concern. So I wouldn't go gung-ho. And I think what we sometimes do is the person that's experiencing it, I'll use the word victim just so, but I'm not saying it's victim in a negative way, but the person that is a victim of it, which by the way means that that's something being done to them, it's not their fault in the slightest, is having their power taken away. So I think it's really important when somebody comes in to help them, that doesn't make them do something they don't want to, and then becomes another person that's trying to control them and control their opinion. And so I think it's really important to firstly just speak to them and help them open up to you maybe, and show that you understand, not be like, you need to get out, or you need to do this, or you need to get the police, or you need to tell someone, because again, it's just somebody else that's telling them that they need to do this, because abuse is about power and control. It's about patterns of behaviors to control that person, and then it basically takes away everything that they are. So I think to help them, you need to lift them up. You need to show them that they're good enough, talk to them, be understanding, be a trusted person, that you're not going to go and do something that they don't want you to do. And I think it's about having that safe, trusted person, and then that can really empower the person that's experiencing it to whatever that, I don't know the full situation, so it's really hard, but that can make the choice to maybe take those steps. I mean, it's not fair too much to talk about my mum, but with my mum, it took a long time, but it took her really to realize it, because I think that sometimes when you're abused, it's very hard to accept that you're in that situation, because by accepting you're in that situation, it's almost like, oh my God, this is my life. It's very hard to admit that sometimes, because I think we convince ourselves that, oh, it's fine, and we downplay it. So I think the most important thing I would advise anybody to do is really be there for that person as a trusted, supported, safe person, and that isn't trying to force them to do something, that can help them realize and just show that when they're ready, that they will be there. But absolutely don't ignore it. So don't not approach it either. I hope that helps.
Absolutely. And the next question is actually a very brave question. So thank you very much. I know you wanted to stay anonymous, but it's saying, thank you. You're really inspiring. How can I support my daughters, both teenagers, who were sexually abused? They struggle so much. Therapy and medication is helpful, but how did you motivate yourself when you were going through depression?
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for actually asking that question firstly. That it's such a good question. And you know what, if you want to speak to me after this, then maybe get in touch we'll work it out, maybe in touch with yourself. Is that okay? And then you can put them in contact with me, because maybe I don't want to kind of like skip it over it, because I know we don't have so much time, but I'll try and answer that. And then if you want to talk to me further, then please do. We'll find some time.
And on that note, we are happy to refer you to other partners as well, charities that specifically work with women.
I think, I think it's, so firstly, I think I was very depressed with it as well. I think that's a normal reaction, because it does really take away how you feel about yourself and who you are, and it can be just so confusing, and it can make you feel like you're worthless and you're nothing, and it's just it's a lot of complications in your head. I think maybe it's not something that you want to hear, but I think it takes time. I think the most important thing is to address it now. I think you said they were teenagers. One of the things I don't have any regrets, because I know that I wasn't capable and it wasn't my fault, but I really wish somebody would have helped me as a teenager, because I went on I know I did really well in my career, but personally I went on quite a self-destructive path. I find it very hard to let people in. I was, I'd push myself to an extreme and to a limit to try and, show that I was deserving. So I did. And I also became quite emotionally detached. So I could, chat and do this all day long and be very friendly, but within myself, I found it very difficult to let people in. And that was a consequence of me just constantly becoming guarded, because I never got help as a teenager. So I think the main thing is, like, is talking about it, taking time to talk about it, showing that it's not their fault, and really working on uplifting and self-worth. It's the biggest thing, because it just strips self-worth, and when you don't have self-worth, it causes mental health problems, it limits potential, it really can make so insular or have very, very harmful behaviors. I think sometimes it made me really angry and sometimes aggressive when I was younger as well, because I was just so hurt. So it's about mending that hurt, and I think it does take time. And to me, I think the biggest thing is really speaking about it and addressing how I feel. So I think I really closed down emotions because they were so painful. So addressing those emotions and letting it out. And yeah, I think being the most important thing is not closing it down, because I think closing it down and being like, just get on with things, or I'm not saying that that's the case, but you know, or just, you know, oh well, you've kind of just got to move on and get over it. It's you just don't. And I think also that's going to be a part of their lives, but it doesn't mean that you can't heal. But I think that acceptance is really important. I think that's one of the biggest things. I ran away from it. I didn't accept it. I didn't want to admit that. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to even think about it. I put it in a box and threw it over there. But I couldn't throw it over there, because by putting it in a box, it was still part of me. But it was a part of me that became like a horrible hate. And that's what it's important that it doesn't become. So it actually, like, the biggest thing I think I've done as an adult is to accept that happened to me. And you know what? It's okay. Like, it's not okay what happened to me. It was horrific and it's abhorrent, that act. But it's okay that happened to me, as in the fact that, like, I don't have to put it in a box. I don't have to be ashamed of it. I don't have to hate it. I don't have to I can accept that happened to me, and it was disgusting. It was abhorrent. It's awful. But I can heal from that by accepting that happened to me, if that makes sense. Because I think when we ignore it, then the pain of that just stays, and it just builds and it just builds and it just builds and it grows. So I think that's really important. I hope I've given like an okay answer, because I know we're going to have to close around that. But I think just the most important thing is address it, and it takes time. And I don't mean that in like a really kind of half-assed answer. I just mean that it takes time to really rebuild the brain, to understand what's happened, and to understand and create healthy patterns and healthy behaviors, because depression really can take you in a place where it's so hard to see a way out. And I think just lots of small positive steps, and each day creating something that's a little purpose, whether it's going for a walk, or whether it's like you know, I don't know, washing your hair today. It's doing those little things that regain the sense of self, you know. And it can be really small steps to start with, and those small steps really start to build. And I think that's one of the things that I've done is, you know, be proud of myself for the little things.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I'll reiterate, you know, we're happy to refer you to partners, and Charlie, and we can connect you to Charlie as well. Now, I know we're fast running out of time, so
I'm so sorry.
And a couple of questions, and I want Naz wants to come in as well. So here's another one from Jane Franklin. I understand where you're coming from. I have had a similar upbringing from you. And on the other side of the Pennines, like you, I still have self-doubt, but I tend to look back on my achievements and now think, whoa, I did that.
Yeah,
so, yeah, great.
Yeah, that's a really good thing. Just on that, it's like, yeah, sometimes it's like, it's not necessarily look how far, like, I think it's incredible, like if you've gone through anything like that, gosh, you're the most incredible, strongest person in the world, because look at what you had to live every day. Look at what you had to survive every day. It's absolutely remarkable and extraordinary. Any survivor is absolutely extraordinary that they still wake up the next day and live life, because it's so hard sometimes. So I think, yeah, it's really important to look what you've come through and where you've come from.
Absolutely. So I'm going to ask the last two questions. So Lucinda Payne, it can be difficult to remain confident when people and the world can be so negative. Brilliant comment. And Keith wants to say, Charlie, have you ever thought about writing a book or going into politics? I mean, politics, you actually will physically be able to change things for everyone. And that's a really good question.
So on the first comment, yeah, it's really hard to remain positive when the world is quite negative. But that's why it's so important to look at what you can control in your own life, just on that. So that's one thing that really helps me, is I don't look at, or sometimes I don't, it's really important that we do look at the world, but sometimes it's really important to look at our own world and what we can do and what we can control within that, and what we can do that is positive. And also, it doesn't matter that if not every day you're positive. I think that's so important. I don't really believe in this constant be positive, be positive. When I was talking earlier, I was talking about giving yourself healthy messages, that even if something is crappy, you're still good enough. So there's a difference between being positive and healthy, empowering messages. You don't always have to be positive. Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I am negative and I want to be negative and I want to feel crap in that day, and that's okay. So I think that's also important, because I think sometimes there's a be positive, and inside you feel absolutely broken. So it's important to actually just feel broken and mend that, rather than pushing those emotions down and telling yourself you have to be positive all the time. Really important. And then the second one was about writing a book. Oh, maybe that's what I'm doing. I'm actually on my final draft. I'm not really about it. So amazing. Yeah, and so I'm really hoping, and I've worked really hard on it. I've been working on it for the last 3 years. So I really hope, like the next step is basically I'm working with an agent, and we are currently in conversations. So that's the next step. So I'm really hopeful that will, you know, who knows when, but I'm hoping that would be something that will happen next year. And so, yeah, really excited about that. And then on the politics side of things, I mean, I already do work in politics on the outside. So I, with a coalition of children's charities, campaign to get children recognised in the definition of domestic abuse. I worked on the victim strategy, again, made sure children are included, because believe it or not, they weren't. And then something at the moment that I'm working on in policy is around changing things for child sexual abuse, and really bringing the grooming into policy, which is really important, and looking at prevention. So I kind of am doing it, but not from a, you know, I'm not a member of parliament, but I do it as an outside independent person, which I think is also important, because it means I don't have to be party political. You know, it's like I can say what I want, basically. I don't have to follow a line, which I think is really important. I've considered so many times getting into politics. Maybe I will down the line. Who knows? I don't know. Some days I'm like, that's it, I'm going to get into politics and I'm going to move from media. But then sometimes I'm like, oh, would I be able to do more outside than I would actually be able to in politics? I don't know. But maybe one day. It's something that definitely interests me.
Brilliant. Fantastic. I know Sad wants to come in on this point.
No, I just think today's talk, obviously, it was great. Thank you, Charlie, sharing experiences with us. I think picking up on what Em said about the taboo of domestic abuse in our culture, especially in the South Asian community. So obviously, when I was previously married, in my first marriage, that ended because of domestic abuse as well. But it's just something we don't talk about. I mean, obviously, my family know, my friends know, but you never actually talk about it publicly, because it's just not a given, because you're always thinking about, okay, if I say this, what will they think, what will they say, how will this affect my daughter in the future if she hears about it. But no, I think just hearing you speak about it and how you've overcome it and being so open, because it is, I think, what my previous marriage ended in 2011, so it's been a while since we went through that, but it still plays on your mind, everything that's happened. Course, yeah. And even now you'll be talking, or you'll be doing something, like I'll be speaking to my husband and everything's fine, but then he might say something and I'll be like, that happened there, is this going to end up the same thing? I know it's not, but it's just constant replays in your mind. But yeah, you know, just thank you for being so open about this all. It's been inspirational.
Yeah, thank you. And it is like, thanks for sharing. That's like really, like, thank you for sharing that. I think that's, you know, really big deal. And, you know, you were saying about those triggers. I think what you just brought up was so important, because you're still going to get those triggers. So I think one thing that on that is important for anybody that's listening, and yourself, and to remember, is that you went through that. It is a trauma. It's going to, you can't just go, oh, well, that happened and let's just put it away. That's what I was talking about, you know, with sexual abuse when I was younger. It's like, there will be triggers. It's about recognizing those triggers, like you were saying, and there always will be triggers. And I think you just have to remember that, you know, again, a lot of comfort and a lot of safety. I think that's really important. So whenever I get those triggers, I don't go, oh, what's wrong with me? Why am I even thinking that? Because I'm like, that's okay. Of course you'll be triggered by that. Actually, like, I probably need some love, some safety, and to remind myself that I'm okay, I'm survived, and I'm actually in control. And actually, if something did happen, that I would be able to walk away, because I would recognize it, I would understand it, and I would understand that that's not okay for me. So I think it's just a lot of self-assurance, and those triggers do happen. It's inevitable. I still get triggered now.
Yeah, no, I think ideally, once it was over, once I'd got out of the marriage, it was the idea that I'm going to put it into a box and forget it ever happened. You know, it's a bad memory, just go away. I don't want to think about it. And even now, like 9 years on, but it's still there, it's happened. And you hear stories and you continue to hear stories. And it's like, when are we going to do more to raise awareness around this, especially in our community? Why is it still a taboo? I was watching Indian matchmaking on Netflix a couple of days ago, and the idea was, you know, the daughter-in-law, when she comes, she has to change, she has to adjust, not the sons. You know, it's my house rules that she has to follow. And it's like, how are we in 2020 but these ideas are still with us? How is this okay? When are we ever going to get to a point where it's like both the man and woman, it's an equal partnership? It's a partnership between two people in a marriage. But I don't, it's like, no, it just brought it all back, and now I'm just like, oh God. But no, thank you so much.
And I think it's about speaking out that it's going to change those things, because I think, you know, domestic abuse happens in all cultures, in all walks of life, and I think the feelings are the same no matter what cultural background you come from, and so is the trauma. And, you know, I think the thing about domestic abuse is that the person who's the perpetrator can use anything to try and control you. And I think it's really important to understand that what domestic abuse is, it's like, it's a control, a power and control, and then they use any kind of behavior to try and control it. So it could be physical, but it could be just verbal, it could be emotional, not just verbal, it could be verbal, emotional, you know, finance, sex. It can be anything that's used to try and control that person. And I think that things will change, but only if we have these conversations.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I know we have gone over, but
we could just carry on all day.
It's such an important discussion that needs to be had. But I think we do need to end it there. Thank you so much, Charlie, for joining us. It has been a total, I don't want to say pleasure, but it's been a total inspiration hearing from you. We are so grateful for you coming on and sharing the story of us. We will provide links to Women's Aid once this session is over. Again, if you do want some more information, please email us directly on diversity@naslegacy.org.uk. And if Charlie wants to, we can connect you with Charlie if you have previously commented on today's chat and she has asked you to get in touch. But thank you everyone for joining us, and I really hope that you can join us for the next installments of our series. So next week we will be joined by the first Sikh council leader of a London borough, Councillor Jazz Atwell, and we will be joined by the founder of Inspiring Girls International and international trade lawyer, Mariam Gonzalez Durantes. Joining details for both those sessions will be emailed to you soon and shared on our social media.
She's amazing. I've seen her before.
You know, I'm really looking forward to that one.
I've spoken on a stage with her before. She's amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Charlie, and thank you all. Until then, goodbye.